When my husband Ryan and I were expecting our first baby, we were so excited. I had been married before Ryan, and I had Chase and Mackenzie in that marriage. But then I ended up divorced, and I remarried Ryan. And Ryan and I had decided before we got married that we really wanted 2 kids together. I grew up as one of 4 siblings, and so I thought 4 was a perfectly magical number of kids that I wanted to have. And we were so elated when we found out we were pregnant. We were excited to tell everyone. So we had our kids, Chase and Mackenzie, paint this big poster board that said, "Welcome, baby." And then we took a photo of them holding this poster board. Then we had those photos printed over at the Walgreens and we put them into little frames. We invited our parents over for dinner one night, and Chase was 10 at the time and Mackenzie was 6. And we gave them these presents of these framed photos of the kids saying, "Welcome, baby." And our parents opened it up and they found out that we were expecting, and there was so much joy and celebration. The next day, later that week, I don't remember what exactly it was, but I told my coworkers and the congregation I was serving, and Ryan told his colleagues at his work, and everyone was so excited for us. There was congratulations all around. And it was at the end of that same week on Friday night that all of a sudden I just didn't feel really good. Then all of a sudden I realized that I was experiencing a miscarriage. At this time, I was 12 weeks pregnant, and Ryan and I jumped in the car and we rushed to the hospital. And my husband, who's normally very calm and cool, I found him in this panic where he didn't know exactly what to do. And for me, I was so confused as to exactly what was going on. I mean, my first 2 kids came into the world rather easily, and I wondered why this wasn't the case at this time. We got to the hospital and we sat there, and soon after they confirmed for me that yes, I was having a miscarriage and that I should see my regular doctor sometime early in the week, but otherwise there was nothing to be done. Ryan and I got back in the car and we drove home just in grief and in silence. Wondered, how was I going to tell the kids? How was I going to tell my church? Yeah, you know how last week I told you I was pregnant? Well, just kidding. I'm not actually pregnant. And this whole time, my body was hurting in pain and my head was hurting in grief. And I felt so isolated, even though my husband was there in the car with me, and I couldn't really process it at all. You see, I was losing this image I had for my life, and I had never even known anyone that had had a miscarriage. Nobody had ever shared with me that they had experienced a miscarriage, so I didn't know who I could call or talk to process all of the big feelings that I was feeling. And at the same time, Ryan was in his own swirl of grief, and he and I, we had trouble communicating and trouble connecting, both in our isolation of our own grief. And that would be the first of what was 4 miscarriages for Ryan and I. That first one at 12 weeks, and then the next at 11, the third at 8 weeks, which actually felt like mercy, and then the 4th at 13 weeks. I remember the grief and the pain and the frustration of every single one of them. Today is All Saints' Day in the life of the church. It's November 1st. It's a day where we remember those who we have lost. So this week on the Daily Dose, we're going to be intentional about talking about grief and talking about loss. We're going to talk about what it's like to lose a parent, to lose a spouse, to lose a pregnancy, to lose a community, and to lose a relationship. And we're going to wonder together this week, All Saints Week, where is God when we experience loss, grief, death? And how does our faith help keep us afloat when things are unimaginable? Miscarriages, like and many other kinds of loss, is an experience of what is called disenfranchised grief. Disenfranchised grief. I wasn't given any bereavement time from this experience. I just returned to work the next Sunday, and so did Ryan. I didn't have any kind of marker to indicate that this big, huge emotional thing had just happened to me. I felt like I was kind of doing this grieving, this loss behind closed doors, like somehow it wasn't real or legitimate. Like it was something I was just supposed to push through and try and figure out with Ryan and the doctors in some kind of quiet room somewhere. There wasn't anywhere to really acknowledge and figure out where to put my grief for these losses. There was no burial, there was no service, there was no obituary, no real acknowledgement that this big sad thing had happened to us. I mean, I lit a candle at home and we did some praying about it, but that was really it. In our culture, we're really just beginning to talk about pregnancy and infant loss. And in so many ways, I feel like it's still kind of taboo, private even, behind closed doors. But you know what? Here's the thing about the Bible. The Bible actually talks about infertility so boldly. There are so many stories of infertility in the Bible. The Bible is bold about it. Then I'm convinced that we can be bold about it too. One story in the Bible that talks about infertility is the story about Hannah. We find this in 1 Samuel chapter 1. It's this lovely story. There's this man named Elkanah who has two wives, Peninnah and Hannah. Peninnah is able to have children, and Hannah, she isn't. So each year their big family, or Hannah coming along with Peninnah and her kids, they would take this pilgrimage to the temple in order to worship. But Peninnah, she is mean to Hannah. She is cruel to Hannah. She mocks Hannah for being unable to have children. And this causes so much grief and pain in Hannah that she is just racked with grief at the inability for her to have children. And this is what the Bible says. This went on year after year after year. Whenever Hannah went up to the house of the Lord, her rival provoked her until she wept, and Hannah would not eat. Her husband Elkanah would say to her, Hannah, why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons? But he doesn't get it. Hannah's whole body is full of grief. She weeps and weeps in the temple to the point where people think that she is drunk, even though she hasn't had any kind of alcohol. You see, I think grief is kind of like that. Loss is like that. It affects all your senses. But here's the thing. We have a God who grieves with us. We have a God who loves us so much that God makes promises for us to get past our griefs, past our losses, and past our disappointments. We have a God that says to us, I have been there and I am with you in this moment. Friends, I want to wonder with you, what if grief is good? What if taking the time to process all the hard things that come into our lives isn't good? I'd even go as far as to say it is necessary and good. When it comes to pregnancy loss, I think it's time we really start talking about it. I think it's time we mark it and take space to grieve, and together we can come together in community to trust that God is with us and God keeps God's promises to be with us through all of the hard, unimaginable things. Thank you so much for joining me tonight on The Daily Dose. We're going to be talking about loss this week, and we're going to be bold about it because I do think grief is good. If you're joining us on YouTube or Facebook, I want to invite you to share and subscribe. And if you're joining us on cable access, I'm so honored that you're here today.